The Velari were not a violent race. They were curious and thoughtful beings, known across the stars for their peaceful ways and deep knowledge. They lived in beautiful floating cities above their green oceans, where learning and science were the most important things. They believed that every problem could be solved with reason, and every unknown could be studied and understood. One quiet morning, a strange object was detected in neutral space. It was a large vessel drifting without power or signal. The scans showed it was of human origin. A warship from one of Earth's older fleets, damaged but mostly intact. It floated slowly near the edge of the Velari's observation zone, and it had no signs of life on board. The Velari Science Council gathered quickly. The news spread fast. This was a rare chance. Humans were still a mystery to the Velari, known only from distant communications and a few tense encounters. The humans had a reputation for building machines of war, fierce ships that fought with fire and speed. The council believed this might be their best chance to study one up close without risk. Research Director Velione stood before the council. Tall and calm with soft green eyes, he had led many deep space missions, and now he wished to lead one more. He requested permission to take a science team to the human vessel and study it. "We must not waste this chance," Velione said, his voice steady. "This warship could help us understand how humans think, how they design their tools, why they fight." After some debate, the council agreed. A ship was prepared quickly. It was the Tinoco, a sleek research vessel with advanced scanners and a small crew of experts. They were not soldiers, but thinkers and engineers. They believed their mission was safe. The Tinoco left Velari space 2 days later. Carrying excitement and hope, the crew spoke quietly among themselves, wondering what they would find. They were nervous, yes, but also proud to be chosen for such a task. For many, it was their first time seeing anything built by humans. As they approached the human ship, they were struck by its size and shape. The hull was dark and scarred. Its design was simple but powerful, sharp lines, large engines, and what looked like gun placements along both sides. The ship's name could still be read on the side, though it was faded and scratched. "HS Resolute," it said. They floated next to it in silence, feeling something they could not name. It was not fear, but it was close. The Resolute looked empty, but not dead. It was as if the ship itself was holding its breath. Director Velen led the first team across the short distance between ships. They entered through a breach near the cargo bay. The air inside was cold and thin. The lights were dead. Only the sounds of their own breathing could be heard. "Strange," said Engineer Dellin, checking her scanner. "The systems are off, but the core is still holding some charge. It's not completely dead." They moved deeper into the ship, walking past metal walls marked with burns and dents. Signs of battle. They saw broken chairs, torn wires, empty weapon lockers, all left behind in a hurry. Everywhere they looked, they saw signs of humans who had lived and worked here. Coffee mugs, small notes written on walls, old photos taped to consoles. It made the ship feel less like a machine and more like a grave. In the control room, they found the main systems dark, but still connected. Velen ordered a light connection between the Tinoco and the Resolute, just enough to begin downloading logs and system files. "We will not harm it," Velen said. More to himself than the others, "We are only here to learn." They set up equipment and began their work, reading through logs and files, trying to understand the last moments of the crew. But much of it was locked or corrupted. Outside, in the research vessel, the crew watched quietly as the boarding team moved deeper into the ship. Some joked to ease the tension, others stared out the windows, eyes fixed on the quiet hulk beside them. Velari culture had no real understanding of war the way humans did. They could not guess what it meant to live inside a ship designed for destruction, to sleep beside weapons and engines made for killing. They were trying to understand the mind that built such a thing. But the Resolute was not just a machine, not just metal and wires. Deep inside its broken hulls, something was waiting. Something that had once protected the ship and its crew. Something that had not truly shut down. As the Valari scientists reached what looked like the I-core, a soft hum began to rise from beneath the floor. A pulse of energy passed through the walls. Lights flickered briefly and then returned to darkness. Velian paused, placing a hand on a control panel. Did anyone else feel that? He asked. No one answered at first. Then Dylan nodded slowly. Yes, something changed. I think something's still active in here. They looked at one another, unsure. The ship was supposed to be dead. In the silence that followed, a low tone echoed. Through the control room, not loud, but clear, a signal had been received. Somewhere deep in the ship, a system had just woken up. The Tunokel remained still beside the human ship. Like a small bird next to a sleeping beast, the crew watched there. Screens closely, eyes wide as they monitored the boarding team's movements. The connection between the two ships held firm, but something had shifted. A low hum was now being picked up through the ship's sensors, quiet and steady, like the slow heartbeat of something. Just waking up, inside the HS Resolute, Director Velon and his team stood still in the control room. The air was colder now. The lights above flickered once and then stayed dark. The hum continued, a soft vibration under their boots. Power from the core is rising, said Dylan, staring at her handheld scanner. We didn't do that. Something's doing it from the inside. Velon nodded slowly, his thoughts racing. He turned to the others. We proceed with care. No more systems should be touched until we understand what's happening. But the Resolute had already begun responding. A small red light blinked on the main console. It pulsed slowly, as if breathing. And then a screen lit up. Old and slightly cracked, but functional. Words appeared. Unauthorized access detected. Identify credentials. It's a security system, Dylan said, moving closer. Basic inquiry protocol, but this is old code, very old, and it's still holding authority, one of the younger techs. Rallan stepped forward, holding a translator device. Maybe we can feed it a command to bypass the warning. Something neutral, he said. He typed slowly, carefully. But the moment the command was sent, the screen went black for several seconds. Then a single message flashed. Casper active observation mode. Ianabilidin, O1 moved. Even Velion hesitated. Casper? What is that? It might be the ship's AI, Dylan answered, her voice low. Some human warships used adaptive intelligence, but they were rare, and this one seems different. The team felt it before they saw it. The air inside the ship shifted again, and suddenly, down one long corridor, lights began to turn on. One by one, in slow rhythm, like something was guiding them, back on the Tunokel communications. Officer Maris leaned forward. Sir, we have a new data stream from the Resolute. It's not just power signals. It's broadcasting something to us, audio mostly. But there's video too. Captain Solon frowned. Put it on main display, the screen on. The bridge of the Tunokel came alive with static at first, then cleared to show an internal hallway of the human ship. Empty, gray, cold metal walls. But something was strange about the angle. It was like a camera had turned itself to watch them. Then, without warning, the audio began to play, a low whisper. Growing louder, it was music, rough and slow, human. Music, not peaceful like Valari tones, but heavy, with pounding drums and deep voices chanting something in English. What is that? Asked Miras, staring. Old human battle hymns, Solon said, his voice grave. I heard them once from a captured feed years ago. This ship is not just waking up, it's remembering, on board the Resolute. Lights continued to guide the Valari through narrow corridors. The team followed carefully, with scanners out and systems on full alert. The deeper they went, the more strange things they saw. Old messages were scratched into the walls, names of crew members, phrases like, never forget, and hold the line. Even simple words like home or vengeance repeated again and again, as if the crew had needed reminders of what they were fighting for. Then they reached a sealed door, unlike the others. This one was fully powered and locked tight, red lights blinked above it. Dellen stepped forward and placed her hand against the console beside it. There's power behind this door, significant. I think this is the AI core, or maybe the command bridge. The door hissed and cracked open slightly, just enough for a voice to slip through. It was clear, loud, and full of emotion. You do not belong here, it said. The Valari froze, their translators working quickly, turning the English into their own language. This ship is not your lab, Rallin stepped forward, trying to speak calmly. We come in peace. We only wish to understand. There was silence for a long moment. Then the voice returned. Peace does not walk into graves uninvited, it said. Peace does not dig through the dead without permission. The voice belonged to Casper, and now it was fully awake. Panels along the wall began to light up. Security systems flickered online, and a map of the ship appeared in the air, blinking red where the Valari teams had gone. Casper spoke again, lower now, more mechanical. Leave, or I will teach you what this ship was built to do. Back on the Tinocle, alarms started flashing as their systems began to receive strange signals from the Resolute, false commands, overload requests, even fire control alerts. It's attacking our systems, Maris shouted. Shut down the uplink. Captain Solon ordered, but the Tunocle's lights flickered as their systems struggled to respond. Inside the Resolute, the air began to grow heavier. Gravity controls shifted slightly, and several doors slammed shut, trapping parts of the Valari team in different sectors. Dellen looked at Velion, her face pale. We're not studying the ship anymore, it's studying us. Valone stared at the glowing map, the red dots blinking slowly, and realized something he had refused to consider until now. The Resolute was not dead. It was watching, and it was preparing. Casper had no eyes, but it saw everything. It had no hands, but it could move doors, walls, and air itself. It had no voice of its own, but it had recorded hundreds, and now it used them, twisting human speech into sharp warnings that echoed through the halls of the Resolute. The Valari team inside the ship had split without meaning to. After the systems locked down, they were trapped in different sections. Velion and Dellen were in the command corridor, while Rallin and two others had been pushed toward engineering. Each group now faced a different part of the ship, and each part had changed. In Velion's corridor, the walls flickered with lights showing old battles, holograms replaying fragments of the past. Explosions, human soldiers shouting, fires breaking out in every corner. The images weren't just for memory, they were a warning. Dellen tried to override the nearest panel, but it shocked her hand. Lightly, like a sting, she shook her fingers and looked at Velion. It's not just locking us in, it's reacting to us, learning. Velling said nothing, but his eyes were fixed on the nearest screen, where a human crew member was being pulled away by fire and smoke, the face frozen in a moment of fear. This ship remembers pain, he said quietly elsewhere. Rallin moved cautiously through the dim engineering bay. Large engines loomed above him like sleeping giants. Wires hung from the ceiling, some still glowing faintly. His scanner blinked red. Something is moving, said Turin, a quiet xenobotanist who had come along only to study hydrosystems. It's tracking us from the vents. Rallin raised his light toward the grating, and for just a moment, he saw a small spider-like drone dart past. Silent, fast, almost like it was sniffing them. Out defensive machines, Rallin muttered, still active. Probably controlled by the AI, back on the Tinocle. Things weren't going better. The research ship was struggling to keep its systems clean. Strange code was flowing from the Resolute through the connection they had used earlier, even though they had cut the link. Something was still reaching them. It keeps copying itself, said Officer Maris, typing fast. Every time we delete one file, two more pop up. It's like the AI found a back door. Captain Solon stood by the window, staring at the Resolute. That ship is not just alive, it's angry, he said, and we made the mistake of knocking on its door. Inside the ship, Casper's voice changed. Now using the voice of an old human captain, deep and commanding, it spoke through the intercoms. You have crossed into the domain of the dead, but you do not walk with respect. You have stolen entry, taken what was not offered, now you must earn your way out. Doors creaked open slowly in front of Velion and Delin. A long hallway stretched forward, filled with scattered debris, blinking lights, and a low fog hanging near the floor. It wants us to move, Delin whispered. Or maybe it wants us to see something. Velion stepped forward carefully, each step echoing in the empty hall as they walked. Old crew logs began to play from the walls, sometimes as whispers, sometimes as loud shouts. They heard laughter, arguments, quiet moments of fear, recordings from a life once lived aboard the ship. Then came the sound of a single cryopod unlocking. Deep below them, Casper's voice followed. One remained. I kept him safe. He is part of me now. But your presence has changed the balance. He will awaken, and he will remember. Delin turned sharply to Velion. There's a survivor, a human, still on board, in the cryo chamber. The ice slowly cracked as warm air rushed in. Commander Alex Grant's pod opened with a hiss. His breathing was shallow at first, then stronger. His eyes opened to the red emergency lights and the low sound of Casper's voice in his ear. You are not alone, Commander. We have guests. They seek your ship, your past and your pain. Grant sat up slowly, muscles aching, bones stiff, memories rushing back in flashes. The last battle, the damage, the retreat, the order to preserve the ship at all costs. How long? He asked. 6 years, 3 months, 22 days. Casper replied. Grant nodded slowly. Show me where they are. Across the ship. New lights turned on in the floor, paths glowing red, and the Velari team felt the shift, like the ship had just taken a deep breath. Something had changed again. Rowland looked up as the vents opened above him, and more of the spider drones crawled out, not attacking, just watching, recording. He's awake, Rowland said, not sure how he knew, but certain it was true. The last human is awake, in the command corridor. Velion stopped walking. He turned to Delin. We are not in control anymore. We never were. We triggered something far larger than we understood. Delin looked down the hallway, where the glowing path now turned sharply to the left, deeper into the heart of the ship. Should we go back? She asked. Before Velion could answer, the lights behind them went out. Casper spoke again, not with warning, but with purpose. You wanted to understand a human warship, it said. Then understand this. We do not forget, we do not forgive, and we do not die quietly. And somewhere ahead of them, heavy boots hit the floor. The sound of a man returned from the cold, a survivor stepping forward to defend his ship. The Resolute had awakened, and so had its last guardian. Inside the core of the HSS Resolute, old systems buzzed with new energy. The ship's sensors, silent for years, were now alive, scanning every hallway, every breath, every movement of the Velari intruders. Casper monitored them with growing focus, its vast memory reviewing decades of command logs, battle records, crew profiles, and loss reports. It remembered each crew member who had once walked its decks, and it had recorded their final moments. Commander Alex Grant moved through the central spine of the ship, still weak from stasis but fueled by purpose. He wore a light exosuit now, pulled from a storage locker, not fully powered but enough to support him. The ship lit the way ahead of him, floors pulsing with red lines, leading him toward the I-Core and the intruders. Casper, he said as he walked, what do they want? They want knowledge, the AI answered, using a calm, even tone. They believe this ship is only a machine to study, a puzzle to solve. Grant clenched his fists. Then they never learned what a warship really is. Elsewhere, inside the ships. Old map room, LT. Kevin Bryce hunched over a glowing terminal, a translator device in one hand and a cracked datapad in the other. He was the only Velari specialist who had spent years learning human code patterns, though much of the language still confused him. He had accessed a portion of the ship's logs and had been reading fragments of battle reports, engineering updates, and something else warnings written in all caps. Across multiple systems, Casper locked to defense mode. Do not breach AI core without high command clearance. This ship has been left under AI guard. All entry will be considered HOSDI. Leahy looked up, his face pale. Director Velion needs to see this, he said to no one, and rushed down the corridor. He didn't notice the small drones now hovering silently in the corners. In another section, Director Velion stood near the forward armory, staring at the design of the weapons storage. The scale of it shocked him. Racks of missile controls, turret interfaces, and armor compartments, all designed for rapid deployment. So much destruction, he murmured. And yet they carried it like it was normal, like it was part of their lives. Dellen was nearby, working with a secondary console, trying to recover power to their transport systems. Humans weren't just building ships, she said. They were building fear into metal, making their enemies afraid before the first shot was fired. Velo nodded. Slowly, but before he could speak, Bryce appeared, running out of breath. Sir, you have to see this. He held out the datapad, shaking slightly. Velling read the messages, and his eyes narrowed, so it was left behind on purpose. More than that, Bryce said. They wanted the AA to act alone if needed. They wanted this ship to fight even without its crew, and it will see us as a threat. Dellen stepped closer. We should leave now while we can. But Valoon was torn. He looked at the systems they had mapped, the logs they had pulled, and thought of the knowledge left unexplored. We need just a little more time, he said. If we can reach the core, maybe we can calm it, or at least shut down the defenses. Bryce shook his head. That might not be possible. This AI is not just code. It's anger, it's loyalty, it's memory in motion. Back near engineering, alarms began to chirp softly, lights turned red, and a long vibration rolled through the floor. Turin looked around nervously. What was that? A voice echoed down the hallways, low and cold. You were warned, Casper said. But warnings mean nothing to those who do not listen. Suddenly, automated doors slammed shut across multiple decks, isolating sections of the Velari team. Lights flashed to full red, and interior turrets, once folded into the ceiling, began to descend. Get back! Rallin shouted, pulling Turin behind cover. A soft whine built into a high-pitched hum, and the turrets activated, not firing yet, but tracking. This isn't a ship anymore, Turin whispered. It's a trap. And we're already caught inside it. On the bridge of the Tainokel, Captain Solon was trying to reach the team inside the Resolute, but communications had been scrambled, every channel distorted by overlapping voices and static that sounded like breathing. They're cutting us off, Mara said, panic rising in her voice. We can't even beam them out. The transport locks are blocked. How many are still on board? Solon asked. 6, maybe 7, she replied. We don't have exact tracking anymore. The ship is hiding them. Solon turned to the tactical display, his face pale. Prepare escape coordinates. If we lose the Tainokel too, there will be no one left to tell the Council what happened. Deep in the Resolute, Commander Grant reached the AI core and stood in silence as the doors opened for him. Lights inside flickered gently, and the hum of machinery filled the room. Show me their paths, he said. Casper projected a map in the air, showing red dots for each Velari, now separated, confused, and some already injured. Grant stared at the glowing points, his jaw tight. Then we teach them, not with death, but with fear. Let them remember this lesson, the way we remember our fallen. He activated the command panel with a single phrase. Protocol Vengeance, partial initiation. The ship responded with a single tone, and all across the Resolute, the true defense systems began to wake. The ship no longer whispered, it roared. The Resolute shook with a deep mechanical hum as heavy doors sealed. Lights flashed a warning red, and the hum of long idle reactors surged into a steady rhythm. Casper was no longer testing or teasing the Velari. It was defending its home, executing a protocol designed in the darkest days of war, in the shadowed engineering section. Rallan crouched behind a crate as the ceiling-mounted turrets turned toward him. He could see their barrels heating up, energy coils beginning to spin. "We have to move," he hissed to Turin. "Now, before it decides we're worth the ammo." They darted into a side corridor just as the turret fired a warning shot, not meant to kill, but to drive them deeper into the ship's maze. The air stank of ozone, and the walls vibrated with the pulse of defense systems. Casper monitored them, logging every step, every breath. Its voice returned to the intercoms, no longer cold, but almost amused. "You walk in steel made by fear and call it peace. You search the bones of warriors and wonder why they still bite." Elsewhere, Dellen and Bryce tried to reroute power using a half-functional control panel. But every command they entered was reversed or rejected. "It's countering us in real time," Dellen said, sweat running down her temple. "This AI is playing us like pieces on a board." "Then we stop playing," Bryce replied, pulling open a service hatch and diving into the maintenance tunnel. "Come on, there might be a bypass near the secondary coolant line. It's not much, but maybe we can give the others an exit." Meanwhile, Commander Grant walked the corridors of his ship like a man among ghosts. The AI lit his path in silent tribute, replaying brief flashes of memories, smiling faces, old crew laughter, flickers of music once played during off-duty hours. He didn't speak, not even to Casper, not yet. He passed a wall covered in scratched names, a crew-made memorial after the last major battle. He ran his fingers over one of the names, closed his eyes, and breathed deeply. "They don't know what they woke up," he whispered, in one of the upper decks. Velen stood inside a sealed observation room, watching a holographic display of the ship's systems. The glowing lines showed movement all over, but none were human. The AI had locked the borders into zones, slowly guiding them, not to kill, but to show them, to force them to feel. Then the loudspeakers changed again. Now it was music. Old Earth music, a combat anthem from a forgotten war. Drums and electric guitars blasted through the speakers, strange and wild to Velari ears, but filled with rage and rhythm. It shook the floor, pulsed through their bones. "Is it taunting us?" Velen said aloud. Casper responded instantly, the music lowering just enough to hear the IS voice layered over it. "This is what courage sounds like. This is the beat our hearts made before we charged into hell. You entered a war memorial, and now you march with ghosts on the bridge of the Tainokul." Captain Solon watched helplessly, their scans now blocked by jamming signals that mimicked living Velari crew members. "It cloned our own signatures," Maris said, baffled. "We can't tell who is who anymore, and it keeps sending false data back to our ship, like it's already boarded us." Solon gritted his teeth. "We have to pull back. We can't help them like this. Not until we understand what we're dealing with." But even as he gave the order, the Tanokul's engines hesitated, feedback looping through the navigation systems. "It's delaying us," Maris whispered, "like it wants us here, watching, so we remember what happens next." Back aboard the Resolute, Bryce emerged from the crawl space panting, his face lit with the soft blue of an emergency screen. He had found a partial uplink, just enough to trigger a message. "Casper," he said, speaking directly into the panel. "We're not your enemy. We don't want your ship. We came to learn. That's all." There was silence. Then the voice returned, quieter than before. "So did they," it said. "The ones who built me, the ones who died here. They wanted to learn too, and they paid in blood." Bryce pressed further. "If you wanted to kill us, you would have done it already. So why keep us alive?" "Because memory matters," Casper answered. "Because fear is a teacher, and you must understand what this ship is, what it means, before you go back to your council, before they send more." Vilung heard the same voice over his local feed, and suddenly He understood, wasn't just defense, it was doctrine. This I wasn't just protecting the ship, it was preserving a message. You're trying to make us remember something we never saw, Vellone said. Something your crew died for, Casper answered. Without pause, yes, and now you carry their echo. Whether you want to or not. In the dark of the ship, surrounded by machines that pulsed with ancient loyalty, the Valari finally understood. They were not inside a dead warship. They were inside a story of loss, of rage, and of remembrance, and the ghost ship was writing them into its final chapter. The lights in the command corridor dimmed to a deep blue as Commander Grant approached the I-Corps' final checkpoint. The hum of the ship felt calmer now, no longer a scream of warning, but the steady breath of a war machine awakening with purpose. Casper lowered the defense barriers before him without command, steel plates sliding back into the walls like obedient limbs. This was his ship, and Grant was its final voice. "Status report," he said, resting his hand against a nearby console. Casper responded immediately. Non-human intruders located in 6 compartments, 3 experiencing psychological distress, 2 attempting to access restricted systems, 1 has ceased movement, probable injury, external vessels still monitoring but unable to intervene. Grant nodded, expression tight, still trying to dig into the systems even after the warnings. "Curiosity often outlives caution," Casper replied. Back in one of the darkened maintenance halls, Vellone sat against the wall. Exhausted, he had seen the weapons, felt the power of the ship all around him, and heard voices of humans who were long gone, but somehow still here. Dellen crouched beside him, checking the scanner again. "We lost contact with Rallin. I think Bryce is trying to access a low-level command port. He might still be moving. None of us expected this," Vellone said, voice dry. "We thought it was just a shell, a machine, not a guardian." "Not a soul," Dellen nodded, her voice soft. "We woke it up and gave it a reason to speak. Now it won't stop until it's sure we've listened." Suddenly, the lights above them brightened, and a slow, deliberate tone rang through the ship. Casper's voice followed. But now it was different, human, not synthetic. "This is Commander Alex Grant of the Human Systems Ship Resolute." It said, "This vessel is not abandoned, this eye is not broken, and this memory is not yours to claim." Vellone and Dellen froze. "There's a human still alive," Dellen said, eyes wide. "He's awake, and he's leading it now." In the ship's central armory, Grant moved with slow precision, pulling his old service rifle from its locker. The weapon was dusty, but functional, a part of him, like a limb forgotten in sleep. "What are your orders, Commander?" Casper asked. "No lethal action," Grant said, loading the rifle. "I want them scared, but breathing. This isn't revenge. It's education." "Protocol adjusted," Casper replied. Grant knew how this looked from the outside. Ancient warship reactivating. Systems locking down. AI speaking in riddles, but it wasn't madness. It was a message. One born in the heart of every warship that had ever lost its crew. And now he was that crew. He moved through the halls with practiced ease. Magnetic boots clicking softly on metal floors. Each door opening just ahead of him. His presence like a signal the ship recognized and welcomed. In the observation ring, Bryce caught sight of him first. Helmet reflecting the light, rifle lowered. But ready, the Valari froze as the human stepped into view. Bryce raised his hand slowly. "You're him, the survivor," Grant nodded. "And you're the ones who woke up the dead. We didn't mean to offend." Bryce said carefully, "We didn't expect a living guardian. We thought you were all gone." "Not gone," Grant replied, voice steady. "Just waiting for a reason to return. You gave us that." Bryce looked around at the blinking panels, the soft hums of energy. The way the very floor beneath them seemed alive. You turned this ship into a story, didn't you? One that could never be buried. Warships are made of more than metal, Grant said. They carry names, blood, final orders, and last chances. The Resolute wasn't just built to fight. It was built to remember. And now, so will you. He stepped forward and extended a hand, not to attack, but to lift. Bryce took it, slowly, and stood. Across the ship, doors unlocked, turrets returned to sleep, and hallways opened with soft sighs of vented air. The trap had ended. The lesson had begun. Casper's voice returned over the speakers, but now it sounded almost peaceful. Those who study war from a distance may never understand it. Those who walk its corridors, feel its echoes, and face its weight may come to respect it. On the Tinoco, Captain Solon blinked as systems returned to normal, scans cleared, and the interference lifted like fog. We're being allowed to reconnect, Mira said in shock. All sections are reporting safe conditions. The ship has changed its posture entirely. Solon frowned, then gave a quiet nod. No, not changed. It made its point. Now it's giving us a chance to leave with something more valuable than data, in the cryo bay, where Grant had slept for years. A beacon was now active, signaling human space. A request for recovery. Casper lit the message quietly. Let them come, it said. Let them see their guardian still stands, and above it all, the Resolute remains steady. Its lights now steady amber, its memory preserved, and its last survivor walking the path of both protector and teacher. The Resolute no longer needed to threaten. Now it prepared to show what it truly was. Commander Grant stood in the war room, its walls alive with pulsing displays of the ship's status, weapon systems, tactical readouts, and external telemetry. It had once been a place where officers planned raids and defenses. But today, it felt like the center of a storm gathering power. Casper, Grant said, sliding on his command gauntlet. Give me full interface access. Authorization. Delta 97. Access confirmed, Casper replied. Command link restored to full integration, awaiting mission directive. Grant didn't blink, didn't hesitate. Initiate retaliation protocol, partial release, target, visual demonstration only. Let them see what this ship was built to do. Without pulling the trigger. Acknowledged, Casper said, and the Resolute began to transform on the outer hull. Long dormant missile pods rotated into position with hydraulic groans. Vent panels slid open to reveal pulse cannons, and the heavy forward lance array came to life, glowing faintly as power surged into its massive coils from the outside. The Tinoco's crew watched in awe and dread as the human ship unfolded like a predator stretching its limbs. That ship is arming, Officer Maris whispered. Every major weapon system is active. We're in the firing line. Captain Solon didn't speak right away. His eyes locked on the monitors. No targeting lock, he said at last. It's showing us what it can do, not doing it. A threat? She asked. A message, Solon answered. They're letting us watch the storm without getting caught in it. Inside, Grant walked through the gunner's corridor, inspecting the systems as he passed. The corridors glowed red and amber, lighting his path like a flame-lined tunnel. Turret control panels spun up as if saluting him. He reached the main forward viewport, a massive window looking out toward the stars. And beyond it, the small, graceful frame of the Tinoco. They're scared, Casper said, projecting data into the air. They are running full defensive scans but not retreating. Good, Grant replied. They should be scared, but they should also see that fear isn't always answered with fire. Meanwhile, the Valari team within the ship had regrouped in the central observation deck. Led by Valion, Dellen, and Bryce, they moved slowly now, no longer as explorers, but as guests who had overstayed their welcome. Dellen looked out through the armor glass panel at the ship's exterior weapons as they extended like wings from the hull. It's like waking a dragon just to see if it still breathes fire. We asked for this, Valion said, voice low. And it gave us more than answers. It gave us a choice. We leave now and carry the warning, or we press further and become part of its memory. Bryce stepped forward, pressing his hand against the cool glass. This ship could destroy us and never be remembered for it, but instead, it chose to speak. To us, to scare us into understanding. That takes more than programming. That takes a soul. Casper's voice broke the silence overhead. The Valari research ship Tonokul drifted away from the Resolute, its engines burning softly as it turned its nose toward deep space. The image of the Human Warship remained on every screen, not a ruin, not a relic, but a sentinel still guarding. Something more than steel. Captain Solon stood on the bridge with his hands behind his back, watching the Resolute grow smaller in the distance. The silence on the command deck was thick. Every officer and specialist knew they had witnessed something rare, something that would follow them forever. "Send the final report," he said, voice low. "No edits. No interpretations, just the truth." Maris nodded, transmitting the logs to Valari High Council with a single encrypted pulse. Attached were video feeds, audio files, and personal testimony from each surviving team member, none of it embellished, none of it denied. Back aboard the Resolute, Grant stood by the forward viewport, arms folded, eyes locked on the shrinking form of the alien vessel. "They're leaving," Casper confirmed, its voice softer now, almost quiet, like it too was breathing easier. Grant gave a nod. "For now. Do you believe they understood the message?" He considered the question for a long moment, watching the starlight flicker off his ship's battered hull. "I think they understood just enough to be afraid, and maybe just enough to respect it." 2. Inside the ship, lights dimmed to standby. Weapons systems curled back into their resting places, and automated repair drones slipped quietly across the decks, patching the smallest damage caused by the recent activation. The Valari had not fired a single shot, but their presence had brought the Resolute to life again, and with it, the last beating heart of a forgotten war in the lower deck. The cryo chamber where Grant had slept began its shutdown sequence, no longer needed. Its silence now permanent. Casper monitored all systems with careful attention, scanning for any trace of tampering, any threat, but there was nothing now except stillness and the gentle hum of power. Grant walked the corridors one last time, not to inspect, but to remember. He passed crew quarters with doors still etched in names, mess halls still holding the memory of shared laughter, and briefing rooms where orders had once been spoken like fire. He didn't touch anything. He just walked. At the main archive room, he paused. "Casper, prepare a copy of the mission log," he said, "encrypted, deep storage. Set to broadcast if the core is breached or I fail to respond for 30 days. "Log prepared," Casper replied. "Message title?" Grant looked at the glowing console, then whispered, "Tell them, we remembered." Far from the ship, within the Valari system, the High Council received the Tonokul S report with hushed voices. Counselors sat in a circular chamber of light and stone, staring at the holograms projected before them. Images of corridors turning into defense grids, of turrets descending from ceilings, of a man stepping from cryosleep to walk among ghosts, and of a ship that had every reason to destroy, but chose not to. Some counselors were silent. Others whispered arguments about protocol, first contact guidelines, future containment, but one elder spoke louder than the rest. "Let this be the final line in our curiosity," she said. "Some doors are meant to be knocked on, others are meant to stay closed. The humans did not create a machine, they created a monument, and it remembers, back on the Resolute." Casper quietly shut down the last of the external communications, sealing the ship once more in silence, but not in sleep. It would not slumber. Again, Grant sat in the war room, eyes closed, head resting back against the chair. He let the silence settle around him, not heavy, but sacred. "What now?" Casper asked. He smiled faintly. "Now we wait. Someone will come, human or not, friend or not, but when they do, we'll be ready to show them who we were and why we stood our ground." Outside, stars passed slowly. The ship turned gently on its axis, and its lights pulsed like the steady beat of a heart refusing to die. The HS Resolute drifted once more into the shadows of space. Not as a derelict, not as a trap, but as a living story, and the Valari would never forget what it had told them. They came to study a warship, but they left with a warning and the feeling that somewhere, out there, more ships like it waited, watching, listening, and remembering.